This silence you've been living in wasn't emptiness. It was evidence. Evidence that you were marked, separated, sealed for something not meant to blend. You didn't lose everything because you failed. You lost everything because heaven was clearing space. What looked like abandonment was an anointing in disguise. What felt like loneliness was the voice of God turning down the world's volume, so you could finally hear your assignment. Was it isolation, or was it initiation? Was it delay, or divine alignment? Was it loneliness, or was it language? The only language heaven knew would reach you. Stay until the end. Because what you hear in the next few minutes may explain why no one ever stayed, why rooms felt wrong, why your presence felt too heavy for people who only knew surface-level living, and why the world couldn't hold what God sealed inside you. Welcome to Chosen One's Sanctuary, where the silent are remembered, where sacred scrolls begin to speak, where divine loneliness is no longer mistaken for rejection, but revealed as refinement. Do you remember Elijah? When the brook dried up and the ravens stopped feeding him, that wasn't God abandoning him. It was God moving him. From survival to prophetic fire, from hiddenness to confrontation with kings. So stay. Because the next signs you're about to see may explain your entire life, marked by separation, the first sign of the chosen. There is a signature that heaven places on certain lives. It doesn't look like favor. It looks like exclusion. Before they ever knew your name, something in the spirit already recognized your difference. And so, rejection came early. Isolation became familiar. Not because you were weak, but because you were marked. Like Joseph, misunderstood by his own blood, thrown into a pit not because of sin, but because of sight. He saw too much, dreamed too deeply, carried a blueprint that others could not interpret. Chosen ones are born into environments that cannot hold them, because the oil on their life was never meant to stay local. You weren't rejected. You were removed before contamination could rewrite your scroll. Even your friendships, your family dynamics, your early childhood wounds. All of them bear fingerprints of divine disruption, because when God marks a soul, He must first separate it, and the separation always feels like punishment before it's revealed as protection. How many times did your heart ask, "Why am I the only one who feels this way?" The answer is simple, because you weren't made like everyone else, and your path could never be copied. The moment you were marked, the isolation began, not as a curse, but as a calling. And the more you tried to blend, the heavier your spirit became. The separation was never about solitude. It was the beginning of a holy preparation. Can you feel it now? That even your loneliness had a blueprint. The wilderness was the workshop. Why silence was your teacher. Heaven doesn't teach in noise. It refines in silence. When God is building a prophet, a remnant, a voice for generations, He removes the applause. He shuts the doors. He lets people forget you, so you can finally remember Him. Solitude is not emptiness. It is the furnace where false identities melt. Like Moses in Midian, decades spent in obscurity after palace life, God used silence to drain Egypt out of him. Before you lead a people, you must lose the version of you they once knew. The silence you hated was the sound of God sharpening your discernment. Every chosen one must learn the difference between stillness and stagnation. God didn't pause your life. He paused the noise, so you could hear the whisper. In that wilderness, your mind became disciplined, not because you didn't feel pain, but because you learned to master what once mastered you. This is where you gained superpower number 1. Icehead, unshakable calm when others panic. Stillness became your weapon. Emotional mastery became your defense. You were no longer reactive. You became surgical with your words, strategic with your presence. the wilderness made you dangerous, not with violence, but with wisdom. You stopped reacting, and heaven started responding. So ask yourself, what did you survive that most people would have collapsed under? The forge of fire. Betrayal, loss, and the sacred shaping pain wasn't the enemy. It was the blacksmith. Every betrayal you faced, every door slammed in your face, every abandonment you couldn't explain, was not chaos. It was consecration. You thought the fire was breaking you, but it was branding you. Think of Job, righteous in the eyes of God, yet stripped of everything. Why? Because some revelations can only be received in ashes. Because some power can only be stewarded by those who've wept without answers, and worshipped anyway. What you thought was a breakdown was a branding ceremony. Loss purged the parts of you that couldn't carry glory. Betrayal purified your discernment, and grief rewrote your prayers until they weren't requests, they were alignment. It was here you gained superpower number 2. X-ray vision, the ability to see beneath masks, to read atmospheres, to detect deception without a word being spoken. The fire gave you sight. Because you've known what it feels like to cry in secret, you can now sense tears behind someone else's smile. The chosen don't just see people, they read them, and that kind of sight only comes from pain. You may have asked, why did they lie? Why did they leave? Why did I lose so much? And heaven answered in fire, because I needed you clear-eyed when your scroll unfolds. Darkness confrontation. Why hell targeted you so early. The warfare against your life didn't begin when you sinned. It began when you were sealed. Before you made a decision, before you knew your purpose, darkness already did. Hell saw your potential. Before you did. Like Herod ordering the death of innocent boys, or Pharaoh commanding genocide at Moses' birth. Demonic systems always overreact when destiny is near. This is why you were attacked in childhood, why you faced anxiety so young, why your sleep was invaded, why your voice was silenced before it ever found its volume. You weren't weak, you were dangerous, and the enemy tried to stop you in seed form. But seeds buried in darkness don't die, they grow. Every strange resistance, every relationship that drained you, every cycle you couldn't explain, they were coordinated attacks. Because if you ever fully awakened, hell's territory would shrink. But now you're remembering. Now the scroll is opening. And every weapon formed against you will confirm your assignment. If this resonates, comment 400-444 now as a prophetic sign that you're still listening and receiving. Sovereignty in stillness. Unlocking the divine mind. When the noise died down, your thoughts sharpened. You stopped asking, why me? And started asking, what now? Solitude gave you back your mind. Not the frantic, distracted version the world demands, but the focused, spiritually aligned mind heaven uses. You entered the dimension of superpower number 3. Hyper-clarity. Where decisions are not emotional reactions but divine executions. Like Jesus in the wilderness, silence became your sanctuary, and temptation became your teacher. You began to see clearly what was yours, and what was never meant to stay. People called you detached, cold, distant. But in truth, you were discerning. You knew not everyone could stay where God was taking you. Clarity cost you comfort, but it gave you authority. And when God trusts you with truth, He starts downloading instruction. This is why you're no longer moved by trends. You move in timing. The empath's armor, feeling the pain of a world you were sent to heal. The weight you carry is not weakness. It is evidence of a heart molded by God. You've always felt more, heard more, carried more than your frame should have allowed. Why? Because you were called to stand in places others run from. Like Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, your tears were your training. You mourned for people who never knew you. You carried burdens that weren't yours, because heaven trusted your compassion. Superpower number 4. Pain sensor, the ability to feel what others deny, to comfort what others overlook. This gift is heavy, but it is holy. It makes you the friend who sees before anyone speaks, the stranger who notices the invisible ache. Because you've survived suffering, you now carry solutions. Your empathy is not emotional, it is prophetic. And one day soon, it will become the key that unlocks someone else's freedom. So ask yourself, who have you quietly held that no one else saw bleeding? The sacred alchemy of time, turning loneliness into legacy. The world wastes time. The chosen ones transfigure it. While others flee from silence, you've learned to make it sacred. Loneliness became your laboratory, and time, your most precious currency. Like Paul in prison, writing letters that would outlive empires, your isolation was not idle, it was incubation. Here you developed superpower number 5, Time Alchemist, the ability to convert delay into destiny, stillness into strategy. While others filled voids with noise, you filled yours with wisdom. This is why you now walk with a quiet authority. You've lived too long in the cave to need the crowd. The chosen are not in a rush. They're in rhythm, because they've learned heaven doesn't run on minutes, it runs on obedience. So what will you do with the time you've been given? Because what you build in private will echo in public. There is a sacred mystery few ever recognize until it's too late, that what felt like abandonment was actually alignment. That the silence that broke you was heaven's signature over your soul, and the very thing you thought was your disqualification was the proof you were chosen. You were never overlooked. You were hidden. For a holy hour such as this, you've walked through fire without applause. You've held the weight of rooms that never saw you. You've wept in shadows, wrestled in silence, and awakened with scrolls sealed in your chest. Not because you were weak, but because you were meant to carry what others couldn't. So hear this now, not from a voice, but from the vault of heaven itself. You have been marked, you have been forged, and now you are being sent. Comment 777 if this word was a confirmation. If something inside you awakened, testify in the comments. What part struck your spirit? Your story is not random. Your ache is not accidental, and your voice is needed in the rising remnant. Subscribe to Chosen One Sanctuary, because this isn't a channel, it's a global altar, and your presence here is not coincidence, it's covenant. You are not alone, you are the next echo.